There was me, that is, Alex, and my three droogs, that is, Pete, Georgie, and Dim. Dim being really dim. And we sat in the Kurova milk bar trying to make up our razoo docs what to do with the evening. Now, the Kurova milk bar sold Milk Plus Velocet, Synthonesque, or Drencrum, which is what we were drinking. This would sharpen you up and make you ready for a bit of the old ultra-violence. Well, when I made A Clockwork Orange 40 years ago, Alex Delage was a creature of our nightmares. Now, he's all around us. Compared to what's happening today, this movie is really quite tame. So, how has the world changed since my droogies and I put on a real horror show? And what does Clockwork Orange really say about violence in our society? Well, sit back, relax, grab yourself a Moloko Plus, open your glassies and video a little bit of horror show cine.
Clockwork Orange is the very edge of the tightrope without a neck. It makes you think about what's appropriate on screen. What is the limit? When is it too much?
Clockwork Orange is a hell of a lot of fun and different on the eyes, and you'd never see anything like it.
Part of the brilliance of Clockwork Orange is that it's the one film where the violence is, on the one hand, preposterous and comic and absurd, but in another way, deeply disturbing. And I still remember it as vividly today as I did then.
When it first came out, A Clockwork Orange was completely overwhelming to audiences. Nobody had seen anything like this before. Nobody had witnessed this kind of nightmarish future that we all had to look forward to.
Oh? And what's so stinking about it?
It's a stinky world because there's no law and order anymore. It's a stinky world because it lets the young get onto the old. Good you dog. Oh, it's no order for an old man any longer.
At the time Clockwork Orange was made, Kubrick was pushing the very boundaries of what's seeable, what's watchable, and how real it can seem.
I don't think audiences quite knew what to make of it. It was shocking in a way that sort of shocked all of your senses at once because of the crazy juxtapositions of violence and music.
It still is possibly the most controversial movie ever made. When the film came out in Britain, there was a moral panic saying the film was utterly unacceptable. Not so much sex in the movies, not so much violence, but bringing them together.
The liberal papers were furious because they had been made to care about the central character, who was a rapist and who was a murderer.
What we were after now was the old surprise visit. That was a real kick, and good for laughs and lashings of the old ultra-violent.
So there was this sort of atmosphere that there was something evil about this film. It's touching a chord with people. It's saying, you know, this could be true.
There was a great debate at the time. People would say, this is an ugly film. This makes violence acceptable.
You could almost feel the media putting their napkin in and getting ready to, you know, spoon-feed the public with all of the most salacious stuff they could think of.
It's wrong! It's wrong because it's like against society! It's wrong because everybody has the right to live and be happy without being told, chopped and knifed!
When they have their moral panics over there, they go big. And they're willing to chew through whatever filmmaker they've got in front of them.
The furor over Clockwork Orange continued for quite a long time, followed by accusations that the film had directly inspired acts of violence.
The phrase clockwork crime was applied by newspapers whenever there was a gang rape. Clockwork gang strikes again.
It just happened that a couple of crimes seemed to have a whiff of Clockwork Orange about them.
Various examples of gangs stripping and raping women, and it was said this was a Clockwork Orange type attack. Some people wrote that they had actually seen gangs dressed up like the Droogs.
The newspapers thought that something new was happening. The scale of it, the extent of it, the amorality of it, the sheer sadistic glee with which it's happening are new. So what's the reason for it?
The attackers would say, "Oh, it wasn't me, it was the film, I saw Clockwork Orange."
It wasn't me, brother, sir. Speak up for me, sir, for I'm not so bad. I was led on by the treachery of others, sir.
So the media picked up on this. You know, it was like the flavour of the month.
Any magistrate wanted their name in the paper, they just mentioned this has been incited by films like Clockwork Orange that are a scourge on our society. And we used to get this all the time.
As Anthony Burgess would say, every time a nun was raped in Berwick-on-Tweed, they'd say, "Oh, it's a Clockwork Orange gang."
My line was, gangs, yes, are dressing like Alex and the Droogs. How easy is it for the police to pick them up? Hey, they're in white gear with bowler hats. How dumb do you have to be?
In one case, a lawyer defending a boy said, well, when you think of it, you know, what other possible reason would this boy have to break into this house and beat up this woman and take, you know, her possessions? Well, the obvious response is robbery, greed. But because the film existed, it was very easy to say the film must be responsible.
Once you start to accept the idea that films make people do bad things, then any defence counsel, particularly in a hopeless case, can say, oh, well, my lad, the video or the film made him do it.
I'm so bored with that argument, you know, the movie begets violence. That's not true. It's just not true. I don't believe it. And I got the same rap on Natural-Born Killers. There was apparently at least 50-some murders that were attributed to the movie because people would be arrested and they'd say, I saw a movie that made me do it. They were saying the movie is a product, like a vacuum cleaner that blows up in your face, and you're liable for that product. So therefore, they would have put a damper if they had succeeded on all products. Every movie would have had to be judged for its safety values, and you would never have been able to make these movies.
The person who intends to murder somebody intends to murder somebody. He will then give it a flashy image that he fancies and use it. That doesn't mean he didn't wish to murder somebody to begin with. Nobody else wants to murder somebody because they saw a film.
A psychotic is a psychotic is a psychotic. It's like a rose is a rose is a rose. You go out and you do it. Sure, they may have seen the movie, but it was one of 16 things they did that week.
I once went to a lecture years ago by Alfred Hitchcock, and somebody said there'd been some alleged copycat crime, and they'd said they'd been to see Psycho the night before. And he said, typical sort of lugubrious Hitchcock humour, but did he drink a glass of milk just before committing the crime? In other words, 100 other things had happened in his life as well, which might have triggered it. How do you know that one experience was the one?
There's been decades of different kinds of social science directed toward this question, panel studies that follow youth from early childhood into middle age, lab experiments, et cetera, et cetera. The punchline appears to me to be this. Psychologists have demonstrated to, I think, anyone's satisfaction that watching a lot of media violence in a concentrated form in a laboratory setting will get you excited. And I personally can tell you that watching a great revenge movie will send me out of the theater feeling like, hey, try something with me, right? I'm tough. For like 10 minutes, I'm really tough. And then what happens is it fades away because it's an emotional high that doesn't last very long. Not many crimes get committed during those emotional highs because, for the most part, people are sitting on their butts on couches at home or in theater seats. These are not high crime locations. As far as we can tell, there's been no effect on crime rates that is at all measurable. In fact, if you look at national crime rates over the course of the last few decades, what you see is that during the period when media violence is really intensifying over, say, the last 20 years, crime rates go right? So if media violence is going to be correlated to violent crime, you'd have to say it has a negative effect. Well, we don't think it has a negative effect. We think it has no measurable effect.
Who on earth could that be?
Is the film a glorification of violence? No, I don't think it is. Because the way in which the film presents violence is in a very stylized way.
The rape sequences were fascinating because I'd seen rapes in Vietnam, and you know they looked nothing like that, but they were fascinating because they were dances, and he had the ability to choreograph it.
There's kind of ballet elements to so many of the scenes that in any other context you'd think, how shocking. But Kubrick kind of makes it funny, and I don't think he's ever been more playful.
You had that smile on your face, you realized what he was doing. He was having fun with it. Should he do it realistically? That's his call. He could have done the film realistically. It would have been as equally powerful, I think, but probably not as talked about or remembered.
The violence is many-coloured within the one film. It's balletic, but brutal at the same time.
Stanley had stylized the cruelty, but possibly made it more poignant as a result.
Stanley's attitude was, if you show a rape, then make sure people really hate it. Make sure people don't like it. It has to be horrible, because it is horrible.
Kubrick, above all, keeps the audience at arm's length. The fact that Kubrick slows down and speeds up the image, these kind of aesthetic tricks are going on, distance you from the violence. It turns it into a kind of aesthetic. It's like a ballet, the relationship with the music, the movements.
We're taking it to a level of satirical style that's not meant to be gory. That's not what it's meant to be.
I'll teach you to break into real people's houses, you fucking...
It's meant to be playful, like the so-called Catwoman is attacked with a large plastic, phallic piece of sculpture. It's meant to be decorative, artistic, and therefore, in a way, more subversive. It comes in under your barriers.
Artists, whether it's writers or filmmakers or painters, are always heightening a situation, whether it's a good situation or a bad. All our stories are connected deep down with what we love and what we fear.
If you look at the history of the world, I mean, goodness knows, there's plenty of violence before Clockwork Orange and plenty of violence afterward, and I don't think Stanley could be blamed at all.
You go back and read the Brothers Grimm, there's some really scary shit in there. No one would put that in a kid's book today. There are things that some people aren't ready for, and that doesn't make the things bad.
Humans have always told violent stories, from Greek tragedies onwards. Elizabethan theatre that Shakespeare operated in was literally blood-drenched.
It didn't tear society apart, it brought society together. To think about the implications of these things, to see that you not only portray the violence, but you portray the result of the violence. You play the tragedy of it.
It's part of what artists do. They present things, and the more thought-provoking it is, in a way, the better. The more challenging, the better.
From that point of view, you have to now go to Clockwork Orange or to any other great film and see how the filmmaker connects what he feels with these ideas of dream and nightmare, of what he loves and what he fears.
An area of the human soul is illuminated by a film like A Clockwork Orange. There is that in all of us, that wish, the wish to raise the knife and plunge it, to take up the axe and smash it. We all have that urge somewhere in us. And every time we see a film like this, we think of ourselves, say, well, thank heaven we didn't do that.
There's not a child in the world who hasn't enacted a death scene or imagined their head being chopped off or pretended their arm was cut off. There isn't a kid in the world who doesn't play out every violent fantasy you can imagine.
And the great achievement of Kubrick is that he shows us what we are, what it is to be human, by showing us what it is to be inhuman.
The movie is really about the freedom of man to choose his path in life, whether it be good or bad, and without any interference from the government.
The question was, if someone was a criminal, how far had the state a right to go in punishing them?
You have a story of a delinquent who's caught, and by various psychological means they try to make him healed, and in the process, of course, destroy the very thing, his humanity, that makes him a person.
Kubrick's confronting the notion of the individual and the institution, which is really the question of not only the 20th century, but of this century that we've just embarked upon.
Goodness comes from within. Goodness is chosen. When a man cannot choose, he ceases to be a man.
There, in a nutshell, is the theme of the film.
A man is not a man unless he has a choice. Even though at the end, Alex is still horrible, still evil, he's still acting true to his nature, at least he has a choice.
The last line is, of course,
I was cured all right.
it's really up to the viewer or the reader to get whatever they want out of it. And that's the beauty of it, that it is so complex.
But at the time the movie came out, particularly in England, no one quite knows where its heart is. Where are we? Where is Kubrick in this? What is he actually saying? Is he just having a good time, or is he actually trying to say something? I remember those debates very clearly.
It's ironic because the film is about freedom of choice. But here were people saying that the film made me do it.
Stanley was upset. He didn't like being blamed for every bad moment in society as a result of Clockwork Orange. It was shocking. And as it increased and got more and more critical, all sorts of groups started to write us hate mail. We were overwhelmed, totally. And finally, we reached a point where the police said, we have to be protected.
After Clockwork Orange was finished, Kubrick made Barry Lyndon. So he decided to shoot the film in Ireland. The whole unit went to Ireland, including the family. And in the midst of the shooting, suddenly a message was received threatening Kubrick and his family.
The police told him, you better watch out. You're getting letters which threaten you. You better be careful.
And then we were told that we have to leave at once. So we did. Boy, did we leave at once. It was really very uncomfortable.
It was a potent threat because the Kubrick family fled Ireland at night under assumed names.
Stanley decided that it would be good not to say his name or the name of the film and just to pretend. And of course we had these cover names and every one of us forgot what you were supposed to be called.
No doubt, he took it very seriously, and since he had 3 daughters at school...
That's when he phoned Warner Brothers. He says, please let me take it out. I want to stay in England. And it's becoming very difficult.
I'm leaving now. You won't ever pity me no more.
At this point, A Clockwork Orange was withdrawn from theatrical distribution in the British Isles and in Ireland.
The police advised him to withdraw the film, which he did for 28 years.
It was very simple. He just adored his family. He adored Christiana, and there was no way he was going to put them at risk if he could help it. It was absolutely understandable to me that he would do that.
That must have been heartbreaking for him and infuriating on some level, because it's like you have an 11-year-old screaming at you and you're giving in. Somebody was emotionally and politically immature and they couldn't understand the story for what it was, and they blamed it for things that it wasn't, and you're out. So what misery, as a storyteller.
Kubrick was a man who was interested in violence, but he was not himself violent. He was extremely calm, gentle, one might say.
The fact is, he was deeply in love with his wife. He was absolutely an adoring father, and his first wish was to protect them, and even to protect the very great love they had between them. To my mind, they were the most devoted couple I'd ever seen.
His energy and intensity that he gave to his films, he also gave to his family, and so I consider myself unbelievably lucky. Yes, I do.
The genius of Kubrick is this. He knew what people wanted. He knew what would be interesting to an audience. And A Clockwork Orange really is the definition of a cult movie. The thing that I find about audiences today is that they react to the film as I thought I made it, as a black comedy.
When the film first played, nobody was laughing. I don't think they knew what to make of it. Nowadays, I think it just feels like we're so much more media savvy, and we've seen so many things that have a huge satirical power. Right from the get-go now, we kind of understand a little better what we're dealing with.
How would a new version of Clockwork Orange be received today? I don't think there would be anything like the hoo-ha which there was, at least in the UK.
If a film like Clockwork Orange appeared today, first of all, it would not be a film like Kubrick's Clockwork Orange. It wouldn't be a film about issues any longer. It would be a film about violence. So what you would get is the comic book Clockwork Orange. It would be a gang film.
The audience is different. The audience is used to this fast-cutting and very violent movies today.
Television is so prevalent with violent acts that it washes over like nothing. A murder is nothing.
We are just less shockable. Children grow up very used to seeing gruesome things and have computer games that are unbelievable.
Sex and violence are everywhere. It used to be that you had to know where to look. Now it's hard not to look.
The media has been completely overtaken, I think for the better, by people who allow us to see all sorts of ideas.
We are now, for the first time, watching on television the violence in the war zones. We are hardened. We are much more hardened than before.
I can remember the TV coverage of the Vietnam War, where basically you didn't see dead bodies on television. You still don't see many dead bodies on television, but you see a lot of them out on the blogosphere. Maybe that's healthy. Maybe it's not putting a veil over the consequences of violence.
Does it inure you? Yes and no. Certainly the concept of a shocking murder still shocks people. And these are people who've seen 30,000 movies. Now we've gotten more immune to it as violence has been more realistic.
It's very interesting what's happening in films now. That while young teenagers were so interested in pornography years ago, they're not. They've seen all that. It's boring and kind of icky. And they have to construct their own romantic vision of something. So what do they like? Vampires. It's the Harry Potter generation being introduced to sex via vampires.
People like to see cinema that is out of the ordinary. What bores me is filmmakers end up making violent movies with no message for money. I'd rather do a Clockwork Orange or a Natural Born Killer than make people think about violence, because it is an important issue. It's a horrible thing when it happens.
I think if Clockwork Orange came out today, it would be seen to be highly relevant. It would be seen again as a masterpiece.
Clockwork Orange is the greatest exploration of violence, its consequences, and society's reaction to it that's ever been made.
A Clockwork Orange will always be at the cutting edge of radical filmmaking. It will always be relevant, it will always have something to say.
A Clockwork Orange, to me, is like an old friend. It's extraordinary that every generation finds this film and calls it their own. I know when I die, it'll be Malcolm Clockwork Orange McDowell passed away. But what an incredible piece of work to go down with.
There is a place darker than any prison, hotter than any human fire.
You are now a murderer, little Alex. A murderer.
It's funny how the colours of the real world only seem really real when you video them on a screen.